Continuing with Part 7 of Zero Tolerance by Alexander Slavros. Final chapter here titled Total Aryan Victory. We've thoroughly criticized our would-be allies and have shown how little they have in common with us and how much they have in common with our enemies. The distance it takes them to travel to their end destination is so short from where they started that they might as well have not left at all. However, they are unable to realize that. To them it might seem like a big journey, and they would only realize how inconsequential their strides are if they knew how far us fascists and National Socialists intend to travel. We talk about something eternal and absolute. To someone who has no comprehension of the truly absolute, being simply stubborn in defense of something, anything, for purely personal gain may indeed seem like having an absolute position. One can only truly see the full scope of things once they have achieved knowledge of the existence of the absolute and of its fundamental nature. When that is accomplished, they begin an eternal struggle towards the full understanding of the absolute and find themselves at odds with those who still cannot see the forest for the trees, who still gaze at the shadows in the cave and refuse to hear talk of the sun outside. If they do realize how far we wish to go, then they must likewise realize how little we have in common, and, moreover, as we've mentioned earlier, they'd be frightened by the prospects of our victory if our assessment of them is correct, which indeed it is. The only question that remains is how many of them are redeemable. For that which we strive for does not serve man, and thus does not operate in a utilitarian fashion to provide one with safety, wealth, and pleasure. Instead, it is expected that the whole of society, down to the last man, serve something greater than themselves, with true joy as the reward for that service. Yet to those who seek pleasures, service will only ever feel like slavery, and thus they would oppose us in all our pursuits, for we don't just seek to fash the border, but the interior as well. Indeed, we will not stop at any borders, for we want to spread fascism worldwide. To the end goal of our allies, the all-white liberal playground, whites-only gay bathhouse, white ethno-state that simply wants to fash the borders and liberate the interior, and have a nationwide white liberal bourgeois suburbia gated community, that is to say, an isolationist state that just wants to be left alone to die a slow and hedonistic death. We oppose the goal of nothing less than total Aryan victory. What we mean by that is exactly what it sounds. We are not content with just a state or even all of Europe. Our goals demand global totality. Total Aryan victory means the absolute global dominance of the fascist/National Socialist worldview across the entire world, which is guided by the descendants of the original Aryan race, who had once again lived up to the glory of their ancestors and answered the eternal call of their blood. Total Aryan victory means a Pax Ariana. Quote, "Make no mistake about it, I am advocating total and complete white power in this world." George Lincoln Rockwell, White Power, Chapter 16. Quote, "For the ultimate political goal of the movement was the establishment of an Aryan world order, a Pax Ariana, as a prerequisite for the attainment of the long-term racial goals of the movement." Dr. William Luther Pierce, A National Socialist Life. To make the whole world once again follow the eternal laws of that which we call different names, universal truth, cosmic order, gods, the absolute, the one, providence, that which bestowed all with their rightful place in this world as per their unique nature in a grand hierarchy of hierarchies, which accounts for all things that make up life as we know it, as they all are manifestations of that same force. There is a hierarchy of men in a given nation, a hierarchy of nations in a given race, and hierarchy of races in the human species. Each man, each nation, each race has their appointed place in this hierarchy of hierarchies. We are all some kind of reflection of the eternal truth, and to follow one's nature is to live in accordance with that truth, and thus to be at harmony with life. The only social organization that can successfully bring about this harmony on a grand scale is the organic state, where all exist as parts of a greater whole. The purpose of the organic state is to create a society in accord with the cosmic order, to be its functional manifestation on earth, in human affairs, so that each individual may live in accord and harmony with himself and the world around him. There's an image here, more propaganda pieces for ironmarch.org, Fascism 101. It's an upside-down pyramid, and on the top it says Universal Truth, Cosmic Order. A tier below, material and immaterial worlds, laws or truths of nature and metaphysics. Tier below, humanity, truths of the human condition. Another tier, male and female, truths of male and female nature. Just below that, race of body, soul, spirit, and their truths. Below that, ethnicity or ethnic truth. And below that, family, and at the bottom it says Individual, as above, so below. Your personal truth that unravels your nature in accordance to all other truths that affect you in the cosmic order. Defining your potential, i.e. destiny, you may strive to reach your full potential or fall to your lowest point. There's a caption beneath the image that reads, "The ultimate truth defines us all. You are a product of its manifestation in variety of lesser truths that had come together to form your own personal truth." Main text. The organic state is meant to put each man in the place he was meant for, according to his personal truth, so that he may serve it and that which is greater than himself. Your personal truth is not the same as a selfish interest, for your personal truth is an expectation that you have to live up to. To that inherent potential hidden within that is called destiny, utilizing Francis Parker Yockey's definition. A personal truth is a great many truths that come together and define you, but these many truths pertain to things greater than oneself, from his family, ethnicity, race, sex, all the way up to that ultimate truth, gods, etc. If you are born a man, then you have expectations and obligations that come with being a man, and the same is true for women. Same kind of expectations and obligations exist depending on your ethnicity and race. In realizing these obligations, you are striving towards the ideal of each, the ideal of man/woman, the ideal of your ethnicity/race, and in striving towards these ideals, you strive towards the ideal of perfection, towards the absolute. The entirety of the modern world and all of its ills come from a rebellion against these obligations, which started with denying the absolute itself and then with all the particular manifestations of truth. And so you have today the progressive liberals and their chanting of "fuck you God, state, mom, dad," heteronormative, cisgender, binary norms, race is a social construct, whatever. A literal rebellion against each level of the hierarchy or hierarchies. In the organic state, each person is nurtured, guided, and evaluated according to his nature, to help him discover where he belongs, whom he was meant to become, so that he may be placed in a position to realize his potential and find true joy in that, all the while contributing to his community, for that is why it is called an organic state. Quote, "The crucial salient characteristic of the National Socialist idea is precisely that it induces the unfolding of the configuring forces and creative values of personality within the community and exerts them on behalf of the community." Dr. Otto Dietrich, the philosophical foundations of National Socialism. I don't know why I screwed that up so badly. Main text. "It is truly an organism where all cells have their role to play, and in doing what they were meant for, help organs fulfill their roles, which allows the overall organism to be healthy and fulfill its role. It is thus, by necessity, a community based on service and duty. You have a duty to all things that make up your personal truth, and in fulfilling that duty you realize your truth and gain true joy of life. You serve your nation. You serve your race. You strive for the ideal of man or woman, and towards overcoming all that which is merely human. In doing so, you have likewise fulfilled a duty to yourself and your own personal truth. This is how one attains what men call honor, measured by his service and loyalty to others of his community and to that which is greater than himself, being loyal to truth and vanquishing falsehoods, that is, justice. And who are our enemies if not those who have rebelled against any kind of loyalty and truth?" Quote, "The purpose of life is not that of being more or less happy, but to make oneself and others better, and to combat injustice and error is not a right, but a duty." Italo Balbo. Quote, "What exists because of loyalty. If that which exists ceases to be loyal, it returns to nothingness. That tears the bonds that hold everything together. It shatters camaraderie. It shatters leadership. It shatters honor. It shatters confidence in the law. It shatters the army. It shatters the state. It shatters everything that exists. Helmut Stelbrecht, Faith in Action." Main text. "It is when man tries to immediately serve himself, his petty immediate interests and welfare, that he begins to act as a rogue against the natural order around him, upsetting it and only growing ever more frustrated that he cannot find happiness in his ceaseless rebellion against the oppressive forces that make up his nature. Thus man only rebels against himself, and can only ever experience misery for it, becoming a slave to mere material wants and desires. Such is the eternal irony that the freedom he sought truly was but slavery, in ways that Orwell, of course, could never imagine. And that is the eternal choice." Scroll down and lost where I was. There it is. "And that is the eternal choice all men face, as it is the foundation of the dual nature in the human condition, to willingly choose to serve the path that was prepared for them and find joy as their reward, becoming more than merely human, or to rebel against it and succumb to base wants and desires, rendering one less than human or animal, making one subhuman." Quote, fulfilling one's duty to the utmost is required of each of us. Who will wait until the demand comes, until it is required? He who does his duty of his own free will, he is a free man and not a slave. Slaves believe that they only need food and drink to live. The free man knows that he needs honor first of all. Freedom is choosing to follow the path that duty requires. The others are slaves of themselves. He who thinks of himself is a slave and bound. He who thinks of himself is a slave and bound. He who thinks of others is master and free. Helmut Stelrecht, Faith in Action. Quote, the individualistic concept of freedom, however, wants to liberate the individual from this duty toward the community. Natural freedom is the freedom of personality, which means the freedom of the man who creates for his community. This uniquely true concept of freedom was taught as far back as Aristotle, who attributed freedom only to the creative man. One can only be creative, however, for a community. Only he who is conscious of his duties toward the community and acts accordingly can be creative. And therefore the concept of freedom presupposes connection to the community. Whoever possesses this sense of community and acknowledges its moral obligations is free and feels that he is free, since his free activity can never be directed against the rules of the community, but instead runs in harmony with it. Whoever does not possess this sense of responsibility toward the community and does not acknowledge his moral obligations places himself outside the community. What he calls individual freedom is not freedom, but rather unbridledness. Dr. Otto Dietrich, The Philosophical Foundations of National Socialism, quote, one achieves true human dignity only when one serves. Only he is great who subjects himself to taking part in the achievement of a great task. Jose Antonio Primo de Rivera. Quote, when men concentrate only on themselves and their own animal lusts, they begin to despise themselves. They become despicable and hated by other men, and they become unhappy and hateful in turn. George Lincoln Rockwell, White Power, Chapter 2. Main text. Any form of liberal society is thus fundamentally incompatible with our goals. Any society that is rooted in pursuit of self-interest and hedonism that passes for happiness today, and is concerned with standards of living as the alpha and omega of all things, is what we seek to root out in its entirety. For this society will only produce the kind of loathsome subhuman parasites that will inevitably subvert any and all truth in the pursuit of their insatiable and bestial desires, from which blood purity cannot protect alone. Quote, we shall create a spiritual atmosphere, a moral atmosphere, in which the heroic man may be born and on which he can thrive. This hero will lead our people on the road of its greatness. Corneliu Zilea Cordrianu, For My Legionaries. So can it be any surprise that those who believe in the absolute, in the truth, and are loyal to it, feel compelled to do that which is necessary, to fight, and if need be, die for that which is greater than themselves, and in doing so actually realize who they truly are? Such men cannot fear death, and their actions are what defined courage for all times. Quote, he who loses his life shall find it. When you are ready to die for something, then you are alive. George Lincoln Rockwell. Quote, courage means, in the last moment of life, to still show allegiance to the thought for which one stood and fell, to the devil with the times that want to take from us courage and men. Ernst Jünger. Quote, true bravery is a constant. It is a singleness of purpose, a complete devotion to a cause higher than oneself. James Mason, Siege, 9.23. Main text. That is the kind of world we wish to build, and those are the kind of men we want to populate it, so that every community is organized in an organic state. Only such an organization can sustain the sort of structure for racial unity that is required. When all Europeans come together to form their imperium, Europe, a nation, Europe of fatherlands, a civilization-scale organism based on common racial ties that exists as a singular entity towards the rest of the world, but is made up of these individual organs, these ethnic, cultural communities of France, Germany, Italy, etc., that are in turn made up of self-actualized persons, each in their proper place, like healthy cells. Other such organizations may very well form alongside it to unify other races and their own communities, so long as they realize their own proper place in that hierarchy of hierarchies, where the restored Aryan race stands at the helm and guides the rest of the world in this new golden age of living in accord with life itself, with the eternal laws of God, absolute truth, etc. This is Pax Ariana. Quote, the white man once ruled the world with an iron, relatively just and humane hand. There were abuses, but nothing like what happens when rule is turned over to the colored races. The white man has dominated and civilized. George Lunkin, Rockwell, White Power, Chapter 11, main text. This vision is the true legacy of all fascists and National Socialists of the past, as they together had contributed to its revelation. Even Italian fascism, that gets wrongly declared to only care about the state, in its focus on the purpose of the state had contributed very important lessons. Mussolini's famous quote, "All within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state." All within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state, only serves to protect the race and nation when they are organized within the organic state as the form of a nation for action. For this organism can only be ruined by rogue cells, by individuals who begin to think only of their own interests. And the only organization towards which all rogue cells in an otherwise healthy organism can commit is that of cancerous tumors that are at war with the healthy organs and the entire organism. There can be no other force within the state that competes with its power that is against it, and worse still, if it exists at the behest of some outside force. All of that is, in fact, the very premise of capitalism, liberalism, democracy, Marxism, and etc. As they throw an organism in disarray and pit all of its cells and organs against one another and at odds with the overall organism itself, as each of its individual cells or organs attempts to complete with and usurp the power of the whole to elevate themselves over it. All of these things are none other than diseases. Quote, "The Jew elevates the part over the whole." Miguel Serrano, The Golden Cord. So long as we are talking about a healthy organism and not a mechanical monstrosity or a living and disease-ridden corpse, as all states are today, the organic state as the form of a nation for action, that is to say the manifestation of the nation's will, then there can be no question that we should not tolerate anything that opposes it from within or without, for it is an attack on the nation itself. Francis Parker Yockey described these same themes in more familiar terms of power dynamics when he addressed the laws of totality and sovereignty and the law of constancy of intraorganismic power. An even simpler explanation is that the organic state, if it is healthy, cannot exist divided within itself by individuals or groups, which must exist, but all living in harmony with one another. It exists not as a society, but as a community. Quote, "No joy can ever exist wherever exclusivity and division of the whole dominate in place of the integrity of being, as there is no point of contact or unity with the living, breathing cosmos." Miguel Serrano, The Golden Cord. Quote, "Universalistic thought, community-conscious thought, must take the place of individualistic thought, and the universalistic, or if one wishes the organic, picture of the world must take the place of the mechanical picture of the world." Dr. Otto Dietrich, The Philosophical Foundations of National Socialism. Main text. Which inevitably brings us to the issue of the apparent opposition between the modern state, product of enlightenment and rationalism, and anything spiritual that it had purposely separated from via the principle of secularism. This is an artificial splitting of what used to and always meant to be a singular whole, and one that must be done away with. The organic state by definition cannot be secular, as that creates one of those power conflicts that upsets the internal harmony of the organism. Thus it must exist as the domain of both spiritual and temporal authority, either by principle of reunification of these powers, or through the Byzantine principle of symphonia, where state and church support one another, the former of the two options being the most ideal. The issue of how exactly will this manifest is not well suited for this article, lest we wish to expand it to twice its current size to take into account all the nuances and caveats. So we will limit ourselves to only a couple of non-negotiable fundamental points. Point 1, or these aren't in numerical order, but bullet point 1. That the spiritual formation, religion, faith, esoteric teaching is legitimate, which can be verified through what Julius Evola called the traditional method and is otherwise referred to as perennial philosophy. This legitimizes, for example, Orthodox and Catholic Christianity, but disqualifies all the bastard children of Catholicism as heresies and likewise disqualifies various crackpot cults and New Age nonsense. Bullet point 2. That a people adopt only the spiritual formation that is native to them. That is to say, a people cannot be forced upon a foreign spiritual milieu that is a product of a different nation's interpretation of the same truth in accord to their own unique character. This matter is still under dispute for many of our comrade when it comes to the legitimacy of Christianity in Europe, and that is something that we hope to see addressed in full in the Mysterium Fascis podcasts, and a series of articles dedicated to this and other intimately related questions. However, one thing is certain, that Europeans must never accept the wholesale adoption of clear-cut foreign spiritual teaching such as Islam, the very legitimacy of which we question as per point 1, with some due consideration given to Sufism. Let's look that up real quick. Sufism or Sufism is a mystical form of Islam, a school of practice that emphasizes the inward search for God and shuns materialism. The very legitimacy of which we question, as per point 1, with some due consideration given to Sufism, which however does not exclude it from what has been said so far in this point, or Buddhism, which is legitimate but nevertheless foreign. When we'll have achieved total Aryan victory and thus Pax Ariana, it will inevitably come to pass that new sacred monarchies shall arise from the ranks of the new fascist and national socialist elite, which in turn shall be formed by the struggle against this sick world we live in today and its custodians, the Jews, their system, and their house Goyim race traders. Quote, and if a nation has no real elite, a first one to designate the second. Let me start that over. And if a nation has no real elite, a first one to designate the second, I answer by a single phrase which contains an indisputable truth. In that case, the real elite is born out of a war with the degenerate elite, the false one, and that also on the principle of selection. Corneliu Zelea Cordrianu for my legionaries. So again we must ask, who will fight this war? The intellectual suit and tie sort? Their entire narrative is premised on avoiding and denigrating the very idea of open conflict. Their method is appeasement of the masses at the cost of the truth to gain their passive support of inaction, and appeasement of the system to avoid direct confrontation. They are cut from the same cloth as that which we must fight, which is exactly why they cannot commit to its total destruction, and yet they claim to be allies to our cause, which is nothing less than revolutionary, one that promotes the only true revolution that is possible, as opposed to the fake revolutions of one way to secure one's pleasure and safety over another, the revolution against one's self-interested concerns of pleasure and safety. Quote, intellectuals turn out to be womanly and hysterical as often as the masses. Pierre Drew La Rochelle, Fascist Socialism. Quote, we don't need any more informed people who won't stand up and fight to oppose tyranny. George Lincoln Rockwell, White Power, Chapter 12. Quote, nobody ever heard tell of a noble intellect. Intellect doesn't move people. If anything, it serves to hold them back from bold and daring action. James Mason Siege 7.16. Quote, forget about middle America or any of those slobs arising out of the middle class or the silent majority. Expect them to remain silent throughout. Siege 8.5. Quote, the gallows' long cry for the pseudo-revolutionaries. The mud flow has passed. The time has come for the real revolution. Ernst Junger, Revolution and the Frontline Soldiers. Main text. And as we have stated earlier, this conflict is now inevitable. The only question who makes the first move, them or us, and when it does hit the question, will be the same as the bloody struggle will determine who will decide the future of the world, them or us. The time for empty talk is fast approaching its end, and the coming race war will make it impossible for the rats to pretend as to their real motivations, and the bloody nature of the struggle ahead is a terrifying prospect for them, as all conflict purifies of weakness. The cowardly talkers and frauds, the underhanded rats and degenerate subhumans who sought safety behind happenstance of belonging to the white race will be driven out and exposed, leaving behind only those worthy and capable of fighting for total Aryan victory and establishing Pax Ariana. Quote, just as the hardest tests cull out weak individuals, it also cuts out weakness in the strong individuals, and this is what accounts for the phenomenon of the strong getting even stronger under fire. James Mason Siege 7.18. Quote, reality has arrived and business for fakers is bad. Siege 9.16. Main text. That is the harsh reality of the times ahead, which is why we can do no less than offer the harshest of criticisms to those who refuse to accept this reality. For either they are frauds, rats, and degenerates, as we have said, or they are deluded and misguided, if well-meaning idiots. If the latter is true, then they should recognize this article for what it is, a call for them to wake up and start preparing so that they are not caught off guard when the time finally comes. If there are those among our would-be allies who truly search for the way out of the cave, then they shall find it sooner or later. However, we'd prefer that it be sooner, as soon as possible in fact, so they don't waste their own time. And if to do that we must bruise some egos and step on some toes, then so be it. Quote, those who start with the truth, though they may do so separately, ultimately end up together with the truth, regardless whether they be hailed or cursed by the masses. James Mason Siege 9.17. Quote, if you cannot make a revolution in your own mind, in your own daily life and habits, then you certainly cannot do it in any other way. Siege 9.35. Quote, when chaos prevails, as it does now in the right wing, it is inevitable that people get hurt when you apply that force to establish order, but the hurt to one or two people who claim to believe in our holy cause will mean nothing later, when we have demonstrated, as we are doing, our ability to help even those we might now hurt to win, beside which even a severe hurt is nothing. If we cannot win the most desperate battle for survival in the history of humanity, it will not make me proud to have been a good guy and to have failed to bring order and victory to the pitiful right wing. Even those who may be personally angered at the exposure here will know that they are true, and those with which they are not familiar are equally true. George Lincoln Rockwell, This Time the World, Chapter 14. There's a picture here, Adolf Hitler. And that's it, no caption. He's giving a speech. Standing at a podium, lots of people, swastika banners and all. Main text. Our vision is clear, the path stretches out before us, and so we must commit to it. Let those who are afraid of what dangers lie in wait for us, and of that which awaits us at the path's end, speak no more of being our allies. Let their futile reproaches and criticisms fall on deaf ears, for we will hear no more. Let those who are true join us, and those who are false hide on the sidelines and stay out of our way. That is all that we have left to offer. It doesn't matter if someone swings to the left or swings to the right. Come day of the rope, anyone who does not share our vision and stands in its way will swing by the neck. Ahead is only total Aryan victory or total Aryan defeat. But in either case, the world will tremble by how loudly each of us had proclaimed our oath to this struggle. I fight. Quote, we do not argue with those who disagree with us. We destroy them. Benito Mussolini. Quote, it is our duty to ignore all reproaches and begin the offensive. Ernst Jünger, the frontline soldier in Wilhelm's era. Quote, no, we won't be judged by our success. They will only ask how loud was our yes, how brightly the flame of will burned in us. Ernst Jünger, blood. Quote, defeat never, victory forever. Bob Matthews. Quote, Hitler or hell. Savitri Devi, Gold in the Furnace. Quote, I want to ask the young to look up to their predecessors in the movement as examples so that they will realize that there is nothing superficial in being a National Socialist. It is not a matter of clothes, meetings, and stars, but it is the heart that matters. For them, it is not enough to simply confess, I believe, but to take the oath, I fight. Adolf Hitler. Here's a picture here. I'm not sure what it says, honestly. It's some foreign language. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know. It's similar to the symbol you'd see if you go to the Mysterium Fascists, whatever that podcast is. They talk about Christianity and fascism. On YouTube you can find it. I think it's a symbol that they have on there. Zero tolerance, page 100. There's just a picture here. People holding flags. Let me uninvert my colors. It's black banners with the crosshairs, the black sun, and the skull and crossbones. Is that it? That might be the whole book. Oh, there's some comments here, I believe. 47 thoughts on zero tolerance. So that'll end this recording, I guess, and then I'll make a part 7 for those who want to listen to me read the comments that people made about this book on the website it was hosted on. All right.